remind you that Magpie is actually recording this event today. We are here with two people whose stories are very important for you to remember. Charles Middleburg is a Holocaust survivor, and Marvin Robb's parents were also survivors. Our speakers will each speak for approximately 15 to 20 minutes, and then we will have an opportunity to take questions. So, Charles, please begin.
My story starts when I was 9 years old. I lived with my parents in Paris, France. My father was a watchmaker. My mom didn't work outside the home, and I had a younger brother. In September of 1939, the French decided to go to war against Germany, and it was not a very good idea. They were not quite prepared. The Germans had put together a mighty army, and within a few months, they invaded the country, and this Maréchal Pétain, who was a hero of World War I, he took it upon himself just to surrender France and said, okay, no more bombing, no more killing. You win, we lost, and that's it. The war was over as far as France was concerned. They named a German general to run the country, to run France. So he set himself up in one of the luxury hotels in Paris, and it didn't take very long. As soon as he got himself all settled down, start issuing new rules. And the rules were primarily directed to the Jewish population. We wondered why, but then we found out that that's what they did for every country that they conquered, like Poland, Czechoslovakia, Hungary, wherever, whatever country of Europe they conquered, that's exactly what they were doing. As soon as they established themselves, they started setting up rules concerning the Jewish population. So rule number one was all men and women are supposed to go to City Hall, have their ID stamped with great big red letters, Jew. Didn't mean very much, except that you were identified immediately as soon as somebody asked you for ID. And then the next rule was Jews are not allowed to be in business. If you are in business, sell it, give it away. If you're not going to do it within a certain time, makes no difference. It's going to be confiscated. Then rule number 3, Jews are not allowed to travel. If you live in the city of Paris, that's where you stay. Don't even bother asking permission to go elsewhere. It will not be granted. Then came the next rule that concerned children, and Jewish children are no longer allowed to go to school. No school for Jewish children of any kind, whether it was parochial, private, or public. And then the last rule, after several months, was that all men, women, and children, whenever a Jewish person was out in a public place, must wear on their outside garment this yellow six-pointed star. I'm sure you're familiar with what is called a Jewish star. And in the middle of it was kind of redundant. In black letter, it was written Jew. The disadvantage of wearing a star is that food was scarce. Everything went for the military. And all of a sudden you'd hear that there was a shipment of milk at the local grocery store, and everybody would rush to the grocery store, and wearing that yellow star, you went to the back of the line. What happened then is that by the time came your turn, all the milk was gone. And then the same thing repeated itself at the butcher shop, at the grocery, no matter what. Life became very, very difficult for Jews living in France. My dad got a summons in the mail, and the summons read that you're to present yourself in front of City Hall such and such day, such and such time, bring a change of clothes, you will be working for the German military. If you don't show up and we have to go get you, the punishment will be very severe. Now that's the first time now we heard about severe punishment. My dad didn't take any chances and wouldn't put the family in jeopardy. On the date specified, went to City Hall. When he got there, turns out that 9,000 Jewish men had been summoned same time, same day. They took all 9,000 men, put them in buses, and bussed them about 120 miles south of the city of Paris into a camp. My mom would get now some kind of a postcard. Remember, Jews are not allowed to travel, but with that postcard, she was allowed to take the train to go from Paris to where the...
they didn't wait for us.
to where my father was in the camp. I remember the first time we went to see my dad, my mom asked him, "You're a watchmaker. What kind of work you do is here for the military?" He said, we don't do anything. We just sit here. We're bored out of our gourd. You know, one day they'll take a few guys out in the field and dig a ditch, and the next day they take another few guys back into the same field to fill up the ditch. There's really nothing for us to do. It just looks like a holding camp. There's not even a German soldier guarding the camp. There's still French gendarmes doing it. Well, this went on for several months, and then the postcard stopped coming, and
Hello, are you there? Egg Harbor Township?
Yes, we're sorry. Our equipment went kablooey, so we're in an alternative location.
Okay. We did get started since time was moving on here, but welcome, and we're listening to Charles Middleberg, a survivor, speaking, and you can join in right now.
Thank you very much.
When the postcards started coming that we couldn't go see my dad anymore, we soon found out the reason for that is that they had emptied the camp. They took all 9,000 men, put them in cattle cars, and shipped them to destinations unknown. We had no idea where they shipped them, what happened to those 9,000 people. Life became very difficult for every Jew in France. Now, French police, together with German military, would burst into Jewish homes, grab whoever was in that apartment at that moment, take them out, and they had built a couple camps on the outskirts of Paris, and then they would put the people in those camps and start doing a triage, separating the men from the women from the children. And when the camps would get filled up, they would put the people in cattle cars and ship them to destinations unknown. We still had no idea where the people were being shipped to. In July of 1942, my mom heard an incredible rumor that in a particular night there was going to be a massive raid throughout the whole city of Paris, and they were going to pick up as many Jewish men, women, and children as they possibly can put their hands on. Now, Paris is more like New York. People live in apartment buildings more so than in private homes like we do here. We happened to live in a building that was 7 stories high, and we lived on the 5th floor. There was no elevator, wooden steps, you walked up and down. And the building had a janitor. The janitor was a veteran of World War I, and he had lost a leg during that war, and he was wearing like a peg leg, looked like a broomstick. My mom went to see him. She had nobody else to talk to, and told him what her fears were. And he said, "You know what? I have an idea. Come with me." Took us up to the 7th floor, to the top of the building, and then showed us a little room. When you opened up the door to the little room, there were a whole bunch of tools there, and apparently this was where the maintenance people kept the building in good order. And then he showed us this trap door that if you open it up, had access under the roof. Showed us how to open up the trap door and had to climb under the roof. And he said, "Listen what I'm going to do. I'm going to manage to come with them if and when they come for you. What I'm going to do, I'm going to take off the rubber tip from the bottom of my peg leg, and as we come up the steps, I'll bang the peg leg on the steps. When you hear that noise, get out of the apartment, come up here, open up that trap door, get in there, close the trap door. They'll never find you." Well, lo and behold, the night of July 16, 1942, we heard the noise in the steps. Both my mother, my brother, and I, we ran out of the apartment, did exactly what the janitor told us, up to the 7th floor, opened up that trap door, got in there, closed the trap door, and we just lay there. We lay there until about noontime. At noontime, my mom whispers to me, "We can't stay here forever. Tell you what, I'm going to give you some money, and you go down and go get a baguette, a bread." I said, "Mom, you got to be kidding. I'm scared. I don't want to go there now." She said, by then I'm 12 years old. She says, "I really don't think they're going to bother a little kid by himself, okay? Let's try it." Okay, I took the money, got out of the hiding place. When I got to the 5th floor where our apartment was, the door to the apartment is wide open. There's a German soldier standing there. I just ran past him all the way down to the street. When I got down to the street, it was incredible mayhem. They were pulling people out of the buildings, pushing them into trucks, carting them away, God knows where. I got the bread, came right back up. Nobody had touched me. Nobody had stopped me. So I told my mom what I saw. So we ate the bread and we just lay there some more. We lay there until dark. When it got dark, my mom said, "Well, let's try it again." Well, now this time I'm a heck of a lot braver. Nobody bothered me the first time. I'm not going to be scared this time. When I came down to the 5th floor, the door to the apartment is still wide open, but there's no soldier there. When I got down to the street, deserted, not a soul. So I came right back up, told my mom. So the three of us got out of a hiding place. My mom had to be the smartest woman that ever lived. She had foreseen that there was going to be such a moment, okay? So she had prepared a trunk, and in the trunk she put what she thought was her most valuable possessions, because we were a working class family, and you know, in case of a fire, you always try to save things from your home. So she had put her best down comforter, her best tablecloth, her best napkins and silverware and jewelry and pictures and portraits. She had filled up that trunk. We knew where there were some storage areas on the ground floor. We dragged the trunk all the way down to the ground floor, and the janitor showed us one particular spot, and he said, "Mrs. Middleburg, put your trunk right here. You'll see we're going to chase the Germans out of our country just like we did in World War I. And where they're out of here, you come back and all your stuff will be there." Well, the next few days, we just slept in doorways. There was no way going, can't go back into the apartment. They're going to come back and look for us. So we just slept in doorways. We ate the best way we could. And then my mom says to my brother and me, "I know a lady that takes children out of the city of Paris out into the countryside. I would like you both to go with her." So we objected, but there was no point having an argument with my mom. We met this lady. We kissed my mom goodbye because she couldn't come to the train station. That would have been dangerous. And we took off. As we were in the train, the lady tells my little brother and me, "Now listen carefully what I'm going to tell you. From this moment on, don't ever mention anything about being Jewish or anything related to Judaism, okay? Whoever we meet, you let me do the talking. However, if anybody questions you, all you have to say is that in a bombing of Paris, Mom and Dad got killed, you're orphans, I'm your aunt, and I'm taking you to Grandma out in the countryside." That's it. When we got off the train, there was a man with a horse and buggy there. Apparently that had been already prearranged. And we got in the carriage, and he took us to his farm. Turned out to be a small goat farm. The lady stayed overnight, and then she left. The people at the farm were elderly people, wonderful, nice people. They felt sorry for my brother and me because they felt that we were orphans. they couldn't do, well, good enough for us, okay? They just spoiled both my brother and me. A few weeks later, the lady that took us to the farm, she's back. She hands me a letter and a ring, and I recognize one of my mom's rings. And the letter reads, "I am sorry to be the bearer of bad news. I witnessed your mom being taken away. She had time enough to write down how to get in touch with the lady that took you out to the country. So here's what I'm suggesting. If you're okay where you are, I promise I won't forget you. I'll be in touch with you on a regular basis. However, if you want to come back to the city of Paris, I'll arrange for you to come back and you'll be staying with me." Now, I'm a 12-year-old kid. My little brother is 8 years old. I got to make a decision. Do I stay on the farm? Do I come back to the city of Paris? And in my kid's mind, I figure that my mom doesn't even know where we are. She has no concept as to what village we're in. And she's smart. She's going to escape. So the only way we're going to get reunited is if I am in the city of Paris. So I tell the lady, I want to go back to the city. I got a choice. I want to go back to the city. And that's exactly what took place. A couple of weeks later, we went back to the city. When we get there, the lady who wrote the letter, turns out that she's married, a husband and 2 children, a little girl 3 years older than me, a little boy about 2 years younger than me, and she owns a cafe. A couple days after we were there, she takes me aside and she says, "I know what I wrote in the letter, and you made a decision. Now, as you can see, I'm running a business here. Besides taking care of my family, I got a business. I don't have time for you 2 guys. From now on, you are responsible for your little brother. You make sure that he gets up on time, gets washed, eats. I know the principal of the elementary school. I'm going to send him to school, no problem. But you're ready to go to middle school. If we go there to register, they're going to ask all kinds of questions, and we cannot afford anybody asking questions about you too. You have to be as invisible as possible. So from now on, no school for you. You'll be working right here in that cafe." I had made the choice. I had to live with the choice I made. My little brother went to school. I started working in a cafe. Now, this woman had made a terrible mistake because she offered for me to come back and live with her. That was the most dangerous thing that she could possibly do, to put her family in jeopardy, because if anybody would ever point out a finger about my little brother and me are this kind of suspicious, maybe they're not Christians, maybe they're Jewish kids, immediately the Gestapo would have been there, take everybody away, including that woman and her family. So she had to try to find a way to protect herself. The French are about 80% Roman Catholic. There's a church in every neighborhood. She went to see the priest and told the priest about those 2 kids that are supposedly orphans, and she's not sure whether they're Christians or not. The priest told her, "Bring the kids." We went to the church, and he baptized us. As soon as he baptized us, he took me aside and he said, "Now you know what just happened here? From now on, you 2 are Christian boys. Not just Christian, you're Catholic. So every Sunday morning, I expect you here in this church without fail. Now you are old enough to go to catechism. When the nun says you're ready, you'll have Holy Communion, you'll serve Mass, you'll be an altar boy. I want you both here without fail every Sunday morning. Now, if anybody asks any questions, just tell them the story about Mom and Dad got killed in a bombing and you're orphans. People feel sorry for you and they'll leave you without asking any more questions." We lived that way until the liberation of Paris in August of 1944, and I thought the war was over. I'm going to get to see my father and my mother again. Everything's going to be just back to normal, and I was very wrong. The war didn't end when Paris was liberated. It took a long time before the Germans surrendered. My dad was one of the miracles of this horrible time. In August of 1945, a year later, my brother and I get reunited with my dad. The day we kissed my mom goodbye before we went to the countryside was the last time we ever saw her. She never made it. She never came back.
Thank you, Charles. And now we'd like Marvin Robb to speak.
My mother is Esther Robb. She's a survivor of the Sobibor concentration camp. My mother is from a small town called Chelm in Poland. Chelm has about 45,000 people. Looks like a little French town with little rolling hills, little nice houses. It's about 30 miles near the Russian border. My family has lived there for many, many centuries, so life was very good there. My mother had a lot of relatives, a lot of family life. Things were good. Really no problems with whatever they were. My mother was a middle class. Her family was middle class. They lived in a nice home with a nice garden, and life was good. As this war occurred, as you learned in history, Stalin made an agreement with Hitler to divide up Poland, and basically where Chelm was taken over by the Russians. So the Russians came to town. Military vehicles came in, everything came in, and life still wasn't bad. What happened was they asked my grandparents to house a Russian soldier, and he lived with them, and he communicated, they fed him, they took care of him. And my mother said to her mother, says, "What is war?" Because she was only 17 or 16 when this happened. And she said, my grandmother said, "War is like this. The men go out into the field, the soldiers fight, and they bring their wounded into town. The women and children take care of them, and that's how it goes. And then it goes on for a couple of years, and then it's all over, and life then continues on. Some people die, whatever it is, but nothing to be so concerned about like what was going to come that she was not aware." Now you have to understand, there was no internet, there was no TV, there was phone, and there was an occasional newspaper. If you wanted to go to a major city, you had to take a train ride, and the train ride would take you maybe a day or half a day to go to a town, another major city, like if you wanted to go to Warsaw, which is a major city in Poland. So you have to understand there wasn't the communication that we have today, where people know instantly on their cell phone what's going on. When Stalin and Hitler had the problem, Hitler decided to attack Stalin, the Russian army. The Russians started leaving. And the Russian soldier who was living with my grandparents and my mother said, "Listen, this is going to get bad. The Nazis are not like us. They're going to do some terrible things to you." And my mother said, "Listen, we've been here for years. We didn't do anything to anybody. We're not in a war with the Germans. And why do we have to be concerned about it?" And he says, "You don't understand. They're different. They have a different approach, And he said, "You really should come back with us to Russia. You'll be safer there." And my mother says, "Listen, we have our family here. Why should we leave? We didn't do anything." And consequently, they decided to stay. Well, when the Germans came in, it was like the Russian had said. They came into town, like this gentleman described. All of a sudden, there were certain rules, and everything, was different. My grandfather stayed at home because, he was a successful businessman, and he thought he'd be under attack. He stayed home one day. A bunch of German soldiers rushed the house. They took him, and he had a beard. They shaved off half his beard just to teach him a lesson. And they didn't shave it off. They yanked it out, and to show that they are in charge. And it was all intimidation, basically to make you scared, not make you human anymore. And he was devastated because in our belief, in religious Jewish belief, a lot of religious people have full beards. And, this was like a desecration. So when my mother came home with my grandmother, he was like devastated, that someone could do this to him. And, he never changed. He was like a different person at that point. So what happened next was the Germans decided, they made a call and they said, listen, everyone who is male over a certain age and, has their own business and who's so their concept was to attract all the rabbis, the leaders of the community to come to the square. So they came to the square. My mother's brother went with him. They marched him out of town to a ravine and shot him dead right on the spot. My uncle basically fell down. My grandfather fell on top of him, and he was actually alive. He waited to the end of the night when everybody had left, played dead, and ran home and came back to the house and told my mother and my grandmother what had transpired, that their father had been shot. It was devastating. Now reality really took a hold that this is really serious thing here. As time went on, my grandmother had prepared, food because she knew something was going to happen, but she was devastated to lose her husband. And you got to understand, she was only in her early 40s. To lose her husband this way, she was a different person. She just couldn't comprehend that people could do something so terrible. So all of a sudden, they made a new rule. All the Jews need to go to a ghetto in a neighboring town. So they gathered all the Jews from Tell Poland, and they transported them to the ghetto. My grandmother started getting a little sickly. So what my mother and uncle did was hide her in the basement of a house, and there was like 25 people living in this house. And during the day, they would go to work camps, digging ditches and whatever it was, and they would bring her home some food, and this went on. My grandmother just missed her husband so much, and realizing that she was a burden on her children, one day when they went away to work, she went into the Gestapo office and said, shoot me. And they basically took her outside, put a bullet in her head. And the reason she did that is that she didn't want to hold back, because she saw it was for everybody to try to survive. And they were devastated when they found out what had happened. Then what happened was they went from ghetto to ghetto, moving them. And one day, they moved, while in the process, they moved them on trains. They would gather them on trains and move them to different places. When they moved them to one barn, and they stored them there for a day, my mother said, she was hungry. Food was, was an important thing. But she said dignity is more. And what happened was, she was able to trade some food for some soap. It happened to, it was cold that time, there was icicles, but it was like a warming period. And she went outside and she bathed with the soap. She said that was the most important thing for her, that she could keep her dignity, that she was clean, because she says everybody else smelled and, it was just undignified. And she said she just couldn't, so that moment was the most relieving moment for her, to be able to just wash herself. Forget about that she was hungry. Hunger was not important at that point. It was really more dignity. What happened was they went on, and she was with her brother, and one night they're traveling on a train to Sobibor, which is a death camp, and rumors had come up about this death camp. They had heard stories, but they just couldn't fathom that they were just killing people there like a machine. It was just unheard of in their mind that they could understand that people would be doing this kind of thing. Well, my uncle said that he believed it, so he jumped off the train. He bored through the floors, went down into where the wheels were, and was able to drop down to the tracks and started running. And the Nazis saw him, shot after him, and he escaped. My mother thought really that he didn't escape, that he was dead, and she said, "Now I'm all alone. My brother's gone, my father's gone, my mother's gone." and she went to Sobibor. When she got to Sobibor, she said it was unbelievable. She said the train pulled up to the tracks. People were pushed out. There were dogs. And this guy, general, gets out, or officer, I don't know if he was a general, an officer, Nazi officer, and tells this cute story that this is a friendly place, and we're going to take care of you, and you're going to just work for us, and then one day they're going to let you go. And she noticed, like, the Jewish people that were, like, administrating the work put their head down, didn't say a word. And this is probably instincts. When they came out, they put them on the platform, they asked, does anybody have a trade? And my mother said, and she noticed that the girlfriend of the guy who was selecting was actually a girlfriend of hers from school. And she said to her, you know me. She says, so the woman looks at her, she says, yes, what are you doing here? She looked at her like astonished. She said, this is not a good place. So she says, just tell them you have a trade. Make sure you tell them, because if you don't, there'll be a problem. So when the Nazi walked across the platform, she said, he says, anybody have a trade? And she says, yes, I'm a knitter. And he says, well, what do you knit? And she says, socks. And he says, well, how many socks can you do a day? And she says, well, I can do 15. And he said, 15, that's all? And she says, if I can do 30. I can do anything. I will just make certain, I'm unbelievable. And his girlfriend walked up and said, I know Esther, she's a really good knitter, select her. Well, what happened is they selected 4 people. There was literally 1,000 people off the train, and they all marched them into the gas chamber where they were killed. And my mother sees all this happen. She didn't see them she see them walking. They pulled her aside, and people started explaining to her that this is a death camp, that you see the smoke up there and the smell. She said the smell was like unbelievable because it's burning flesh. She said it was like you just couldn't believe how terrible it was. And he said, this is a death camp. No one survives this death camp. There were only 300 workers there who administrated the camp. Basically, they did this. They went sorting through the stuff. They made things for the Nazis like, jewelry and socks and clothing, whatever they wanted, and that was, pretty much what they did. She realized this is really bad, and she really realized that she wanted to live. She just had that instinct in her that she said, I will survive this thing. And because she said other people just fell apart. They just couldn't handle what was going on. One day they asked her, well, not asked her, told her that she should go out to the military officers' quarters and clean it up. So they selected 3-4 girls, and they took them out to the building. And my mother's cleaning, and all of a sudden and they said, don't look out any windows when you're there. When she's there, curiosity got her. A train pulls up, and she sees the same thing like happened to her. All the people get off the train, they select, and the guy gives the cute story in the beginning, trying to trick the people. And you have to understand what they did is my mother didn't have her hair shaved. She didn't have any numbers because they didn't want the people to get off the train and get scared. They saw people dressed up nicely. My mother wore nice clothes. They were allowed to take out of when they went through the clothing of the dead, they were able to pick out whatever they wanted. So that way when they came, the people on the train, they came, they saw people dressed up, they looked healthy, and they wouldn't get nervous. Anyway, it just got her. She said, I have to look out the window. So she looks out the window, sees this all transpire. And at the end, all the Jews are taking whatever's remaining to the gas chamber. She sees a noise coming out of one of the train cars. And she sees a Nazi run over there, and he looks inside. And it appears a mother had a baby. And she figured this was the end. So she figured maybe better leave my baby on the train. Maybe something good will happen. So she left her baby on the train. My mother sees a Nazi go on the train, take the baby, swat him against the side of the train, kill him, and throws him among the trash like he was a doll. And my mother was like devastated at that point. She just couldn't believe people could do such things to people. Anyway, as time went on, you have to watch where you go. I mean, they would take, there would be soldiers just taking pot shots at you. I mean, it was just like mayhem all the time. Anyway, what happened is next, they were in a wooded area, and they would take strong young Jewish boys and send them out into the woods to chop trees down and for lumber. And while they were out there in the woods, 4 or 5 decided to escape, and they caught them, and they brought them back into the camp. They were bleeding. They were all swollen, whatever it was. And what happened is Wagner, who was the assistant commandant, said, "Listen," lined up all the people that were, 300 people that were there, and said to them, "Listen, we're going to teach you a lesson today that you'll never forget." So he says, what I'm going to do today is these people tried to escape and no one escapes here, and I'm going to teach you that you'll never escape here. So he said, listen to the 300 people, the people that he had beaten up. He said, listen, you are to pick somebody from this group that will die with you right in front of, of the other people. So my mother's standing there, and these people, have to select. So they go and they walk through, and fortunately, they didn't select her. The people walked back with those people, and they machine gunned them down. At that point, my mother's cousin had come there. He became a leader, Leon, and he said, listen, we cannot escape here as 2-3 people. If we're going to escape, we need to escape as the entire camp. So time went on, but my mother wasn't a soldier. Most of the people were not soldiers, never been in the military, never really did any, military action. So anyway, as time goes on, one day, a group of soldiers show up, and they're Russian soldiers, and they come into camp, and they're beating them, screaming at them, the Nazis, and find out that they are Russian Jewish soldiers. And they had taken them because they were big strapping guys, and they were going to work out in the forest. So Leon said to the group there, he said, listen, this is our opportunity. They have military experience, and they know what to do. We need to tell them and develop a relationship with them, and then we might be able to develop an escape. Well, the Russians really were only interested in themselves. They weren't really interested in helping anybody else. But after time, they realized that this was a good thing, and they made a plan to escape. And they waited till this guy Wagner, who I mentioned before, who was always the assistant commandant, would be on vacation, because they knew that when he was out of control, the people that below him were not as powerful and could not, react as quickly. So what happened is, the night before the escape, my mother has this dream. Her mother comes into camp and says, Esther, and she had gotten these boots that she kept that my grandmother had given her, and she said, you put these boots on, and my grandmother takes her and walks her out the front gate. She said, then, she wakes up in the morning, everybody's nervous because at 12 o'clock they're going to have roll call, and that's when they're going to escape. And the way they planned it is they knew that the Nazis had certain things they liked, like one guy liked boots, one guy liked, so they would go to him and say, listen, we just got in these new boots, you need to come into this room and we'll try on the new boots. Or there were some people that got new coats. And they attracted all the major players, the Nazis, to those places, and they would basically kill them and stab them. And that's what they did. So as time went on, they had killed 7 Nazis at that point. And my mother was a courier. As everything was happening, she was running, telling them they killed this person. So it came back to the main place where the people had planned the escape were there, and so they would get the information. What happened was one person, 2 minutes, I'll finish quick. And basically, at that point, 12 o'clock came, and they didn't have all the Germans that they wanted, and Leon got on the table and said, listen, every man for himself, and they rushed the the wire fence, the front gate, and bullets were flying everywhere. My mother saw a ladder, jumped over the ladder. There were mines all around the camp. She stepped on dead bodies because she didn't want to step on the mines. And as she was running, a woman said, "Help me," and she went to help her, and the woman got shot dead. And she said, and then she walked a little further, she got shot in the head, it just grazed her, and then all of a sudden she ran and ran and ran, and she was in the forest. And she was one of about 60 or 70 people that escaped. And then basically at that point, she went on this mission. She had in her dream, her father had a relationship with a non-Jew who had like a farm, gentleman's farm, and she ran there. And when she got there, she laid on the straw, and she's talking with another person that escaped with her. And all of a sudden, it was nighttime. This thing grabs her, and it's her brother. He had run to the same place, and they survived in the straw through the war. And then when they came back to Chelm, it was not safe for Jews because a lot of the Polish people had taken their houses and they didn't want to give them up. So my mother and a group of people went to Berlin and eventually came to America.
Thank you. Okay, we'd like to open up for questions, and we'd like to offer the first question from Egg Harbor Township. So do you have any questions?
Yes, some of our kids here, not many of the people here, we just saw the film Escapes from Sobibor, and I was very impressed by your mom, and I was wondering what did she think of that film? What did you think of that film? The way you describe it, it sounds very much, I mean, they've got the facts down, but what about the actress who portrayed her and that kind of stuff? Is there any insight there?
Well, my mother is short, and the actress was tall. So that when I'm looking at the film, it's kind of amusing. But what's interesting? My mother and women are like this. Men usually put themselves as the fighters. My mother tells the story very accurately because women do not do that. I know that Richard Roschke, who wrote the book and was involved, enjoyed talking to my mother because he said the truth really came out with what she saw. She said it's pretty accurate. The only problem that she saw, whatever gore they showed there or what was, the events, like some of them what I described to you were shown in the movie, she said it was much worse. I mean, it was much, much worse. I mean, they couldn't show like people having their skin flayed and, just terrible things, people being stabbed, tortured. She said, people couldn't deal with that. But the book and the movie is pretty accurate. What transpired, and I saw the actors. It was kind of interesting. We went to a preview, and one of the Nazis is sitting there having drinks with me, and I'm looking at him like, it's kind of weird. You see him in the movie, and then he's a nice guy. That was it. But the movie was pretty accurate.
Sterling High School, do you have any questions? Take one. Anyone?
I have a question.
Yes.
It's for, you said that your mom was allowed to go see your dad when he was at the work camp, right? Were you allowed to see him too, or was it just your mom?
The question is, your mom was allowed to see your dad when he was at the work camp. Was that correct? And did you get to go see him too?
Yes. When my dad was in that holding camp, before he got shipped to destinations unknown, there were a period of a few months that we were able to go once a month to see my dad. Yes.
Thank you.
Egg Harbor Township, do you have another question?
Are we muted? No, you're good. No. I don't understand why our students of late, on both sides, are reluctant to ask questions. Maybe they find everything so fascinating, but I'm kind of thinking about the idea of luck, pure luck, what do you think of that? I mean, I know faith plays a part, but what about luck? What you guys are doing?
I'll be honest, I don't believe that there was any luck involved here. That's one question that nobody ever asked me before, and I'm kind of stumped to answer something like that. There were just a series of events, and as a small child, I was confronted of making decisions. It was not a matter of luck. It was a matter of survival. When I got this letter to choose, do I stay back in the country? Do I come back to the city? It had nothing to do with luck. It had to do for me to make a decision which way to go. Was it lucky for me to go back into the city instead of staying on the farm? I don't think so. The only good thing about it is that eventually I got reunited with my dad because I had made that decision to come back to the city. If I would have stayed in the country, my dad would have never been able to find us. Neither would I have known that my father survived. So I don't think that luck had anything to do with it. I just don't believe that was a series of lucky events. None of them were lucky events.
Marvin?
My mother felt that, luck was a factor. She believed that opportunities came her way, like for instance when she came to Sobibor and she happened to meet the woman who knew her, and but she said that moment when she made the decision to stand up and say, I can knit, that wasn't luck. That was her taking the initiative. When she jumped over the fence, jumping on the bodies, not walking into the mines, that was her initiative, her feeling. But luck was a factor because, to be honest with you, a lot of people did a lot of right things and they're not here to say it. A lot of people resisted and they're not here to tell their story. So.
Egg Harbor Township, thank you. And Sterling High School, do you have another question? Yes.
For Charles, did you and your brother ever ask your dad how he did survive?
Did you and your brother ever ask your father how he survived?
Yes. Actually, it took a long time for my dad to talk. He just wouldn't talk about. I mean, he survived 3 years in Auschwitz, of all places, one of the worst extermination camps. And when we finally got him to talk, he said that when he got to Auschwitz, when that train from France wound up in Auschwitz, there was, as they were coming up the train, there was a Nazi officer standing there and doing a triage and say, what did you do before you got on the train? I'm a butcher, stand over here. What did you do before you got on the train? I'm a tailor, stand over here. When he came to my dad, they said, what did you do before you got on the train? He said, I'm a watchmaker. Oh, you're a watchmaker? You stand over here. That saved his life. Because when he got to that camp, they hadn't even built a crematorium yet. He was one of the first one there. So being a watchmaker, they were confiscating all the jewelry, all the watches, all the gold. So they gave him, in the corner of the barrack, they gave him a stand where they would bring all this jewelry to fix. And when he would fix it, it was for the camp guards. So every time he would give back to the camp guard a piece of jewelry or whatever that he had worked on, he would say, this is worth another bowl of soup, and this is worth another slice of bread. And that's how he managed to survive. Just being a watchmaker, and sheer luck that on that convoy, he was the only one that was a watchmaker in that convoy.
Egg Harbor Township, where you have time for one more short question.
I don't think we have any, but I want to thank you gentlemen for sharing your stories. Always fascinating. And everybody wave. Thank you very much.
Thank you for joining us. I guess they're out. Okay. Well, now the floor is all yours for questions. Yes.
I have a question for Charles. One of the things I've often wondered, when you talked about being forced to wear the star, were there Jews that lived in Paris? Let's just say, for example, a young guy in his 20s, he's single, doesn't really have any family. No one really knew he was Jewish. Were there Jews that didn't wear the star, got by, not really having identified themselves as being Jewish? Did anyone discuss behaving in that way? Could you talk about that?
It's quite possible. To answer you directly, it's quite possible that there were single young man, a single young woman who has been living there and never was any question, are you Christian, are you Jewish, just living among other families, and there was never a question about it, and decided, nobody will ever know that I'm a Jew, so I'm not going to wear that star. The only thing is that, did that person initially go to City Hall to have its ID papers stamped Jew? The minute you had that ID paper stamped Jew, it was a telltale indication, so that if they were caught showing ID and not wearing the yellow star, they were in deep trouble. So I'm not sure that those who didn't go to have it stamped, their ID paper, could get away with it. But you have to understand something about this. Jews were singled out. There's no question about it. And then, obviously, by wearing this yellow star, not only were they singled out, but they were you couldn't see them immediately, okay? So it was obvious that they were being selected to be separate from the rest of the population. We knew that there was a problem, but we didn't know that what the problem was going to lead up to.
Sorry.
So at the time when many Jews got the stamp, you didn't really think it was that big of a deal, not realizing what it would lead to. So I guess some people just said, oh, I should go get it stamped, and that's that. So there wasn't really, I guess people didn't really give much thought to it at the time.
I'm not sure.
Marvin, do you want to have a shot?
Yeah. Oh, there were people, and my aunt was in Germany. Her family got papers saying that they were not Jewish, and they were able to survive the war in Germany, actually. I know other people that became trolley card, single men who had blue eyes and blonde hair, and basically were able to get those kind of either phony or whatever it was. But that was very, this was a progression. It was not like one day they were taking you to concentration camps. The first day, people didn't realize, just like, you take an event that happens in America, until it happens, you don't know that it's going to happen. So, it was a progression. This was a thought-out plan of how to do it. And it was, through intimidation, over time, and you didn't know what the next step was going to be. So to answer your question, yes, there were people.
Okay. We'll sign off now. Thank you very much for joining us today, everyone, and we enjoyed having you here.
Thank you very much, and thanks for joining us, Egg Harbor. Sorry for your technical troubles.
Do we have